Cambridge Technical Level 3 Unit 2. This is for Learning Outcome 3. The focus will be to understand how current legislation and national initiatives promote anti-discriminatory practice in health and social care and childcare environments. This is PowerPoint 4. So first of all, we have a starter activity. From April 2016, all nurses and midwives have to revalidate to maintain their registration with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the NMC. I want you to work in pairs or alone if you're at home working remotely to research and discuss the introduction of revalidation. First of all, find out what it means and consider the impact of this initiative for nurses and midwives, for care providers and for people who use that healthcare environment. So stop the PowerPoint, research, and come back to this as soon as you've done that. First of all, we're going to look at key aspects of current legislation. Legislation is there to protect people. It protects the rights of both individuals receiving care and the people that provide the care and support. It also states their responsibilities to society. Laws provide a legal framework for care and provide individuals with the right to access and receive care and support. The government uses legislation to create regulatory arrangements for monitoring care organisations and to set standards for delivery, for service delivery. Can you please make sure that you've underlined and highlighted the legislation aspect, what it is, and how the government see legislation? It's very, very important for your exam. So we have another task where you are expected to research, so you will need to pause the PowerPoint and you will need to come back to the PowerPoint once you've researched all the following legislation. It will take a while. It isn't something you're going to be able to do quickly, but I do expect you to Google it or use the resources that you've been provided with. You are going to research the following key legislation and then write a summary about what each legislation aims to do. It is vital that you actually find out what aim they each have, what the aims of the legislation, because you will need that for your exam. So there is the Care Act 2014, the Equality Act 2010, the Mental Capacity Act 2005, the Children Act 2004, the Data Protection Act 1998, but also it's important to look at the revision of the Data Protection Act, which is the GDPR, and that happened in 2018. So that was when we all had to, every time we went onto a new website or received emails, it asked us whether we were happy to do that. So it's very, very important that you look at the revision of the Data Protection Act. Then we have the Human Rights Act and the Children's and Family Act. It is so important that you get a decent summary. Don't rush it. Don't just put anything down, copy and paste. Read it and then summarise what you've read. Perhaps when you go to human rights, make sure you've written down some or all of the rights that it covers. Hopefully you've made good research notes on all the legislation that we discussed on the previous page. For those of you that want additional information, I'm going to quickly and very briefly go through each of the acts here. It can be used to support your notes, but mostly I need you to have your own notes in addition to these, because you'll be able to gather more information that way. So the Care Act 2014 relates to those being assessed or receiving social care and their carers. Key aspects of it include duty of local authorities to promote an individual's well-being. Continuity of care must be provided if someone moves from one area to another. Duty of local authorities to carry out child's needs assessments for young people. To ensure an independent advocate is to be available to facilitate the involvement of an adult or carer who is a subject of an assessment. So there's lots of aspects that it looks after. You may have found something different, which is brilliant, so that you can add it to the information here. So we move on to the Health and Social Care Act. The main aspect of this legislation is about enabling patients to have more control over the care that they receive and the person working with them. Also, healthcare workers have the freedom to ensure that they commission care that meets local needs. No decision without me is a guiding principle. Patients should be involved in all decision making. The Equality Act is one of the most common acts to turn up in an exam. It became law in 2010. It covers everybody in Britain and protects people from discrimination, harassment and victimisation. Everyone in Britain is protected, and it's aimed to protect vulnerable people. There are 9 protected characteristics so that people should be treated equally, regardless of age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. It makes direct and indirect discrimination on the basis of one of the protected characteristics above illegal. So when we go back to the PowerPoint before this, where we're talking about indirect and direct discrimination, and if it's based on one of the above protected characteristics, it's actually illegal. It makes sure people aren't discriminated in education, employment, access to goods, services and housing. The Mental Capacity Act in 2005, it's been in force really since 2007 and applies to England and Wales only. The main purpose of this is to promote and safeguard decision-making within a legal framework. So it empowers people to make decisions for themselves wherever possible. So those that are having mental health problems, it does try to encourage them to make decisions where they can. And it protects people who have a lack of capacity by providing a flexible framework that places individuals in the heart of the decision-making process. So it's still trying to allow them to make their decisions. It applies to everyone involved in the care, treatment and support of people aged 16 and over. It's designed to protect and restore power to those vulnerable people who lack capacity. After we've watched the film The Children Act with Emma Thompson, we can see how important this act has been in protecting the lives of young people and the difficult decisions that can be made because of this act. This act involves protecting children at risk. It could involve using an emergency protection order to take a child that's at risk away from their family. The children's need must come first. A child has a right to be consulted. Children who are old enough are encouraged to have a voice. Children have a right to an advocate. Children have a right to stay safe, be healthy, enjoying and achieving, making a positive contribution and economic well-being. It encourages good partnership working. It's there to represent the children's needs, but it's also there to protect them, which we saw with the young boy that had that was a Jehovah's Witness and needed a blood transfusion. The law stated that despite him being 17, he was still considered a child, and therefore the decision was going to be made for him, which they believe was for his better, to help him overcome his leukemia. They gave the blood transfusion to him, and he was survived and he was very healthy. So that law was used to save his life. Had he not have had the blood transfusion, he could have died, and he could have had or he could have had very serious health implications. He could have been blind, he could have been mentally disabled. So it's there to protect young children. The Data Protection Act 1998 is here to ensure that people's information is kept confidential. It was to help ensure that companies weren't passing out information that they shouldn't do. So information should only be collected with the permission of the service user. Care providers should only collect and use information that is needed. Records should be kept accurate and up to date. Information on an individual should be kept no longer than it is needed. And people have a right to know what information is held on them. You can now ask your local GP surgery to see your medical records, to see what has been written up about you. It's very, very important, this act, that non-authorised people should not have access to information that is private. Companies should do everything they can to ensure that the information they hold on you is kept confidential and that nobody else that shouldn't have a right to it can access it. In 2018, the Data Protection Act was revised. The Data Protection Act 2018 controls how your personal information is used by organisations, businesses or the government. Everyone is responsible for using personal data. So everyone responsible for using personal data has to follow strict rules called data protection principles. And they must make sure that the information they gather is used fairly, lawfully, and transparently. It should be used for specified explicit purposes. It should be used in a way that's adequate, relevant, and limited to only what is necessary. It should be accurate and, where necessary, kept up to date, and it should be kept for no longer than is necessary. It should be handled in a way that ensures appropriate security, including protection against unlawful or unauthorized processing, access, loss, destruction, or damage. This was really, really brought in because technology has enhanced so much since 1998, and it's making sure that the companies that have information on you keep that confidential. The Human Rights Act 1998. In the UK, human rights are protected by the Human Rights Act in 1998. Public authorities like the NHS must follow the Act. If a public authority has breached your human rights, you might be able to take action underneath this Act. You may be able to take them to law if those rights have been breached in any way. Examples of conventional human rights include a right to life. We all have a right to life. That's a legal requirement. So if anyone breaches that, then they are punished. You have a right to freedom from torture and inhumane and degrading treatment, a right to freedom from slavery or servitude, a right to liberty and security, a right to a fair trial, right to no punishment without law, right to respect for private and family life, right to freedom and thought, conscience and religion, right to freedom of expression, right to freedom of assembly and association, right to marry, right to enjoyment of the rights and freedoms without discrimination on any ground, protection of property, right to education, and a right to free elections. The Human Rights Acts mean that if any point the NHS, say for example you're being treated by the NHS, they breach these or they do not deliver on these. For example, you receive degrading treatment whilst in a hospital, perhaps, or even a care home where you are beaten or you're physically assaulted by members of staff. The Human Rights Act means that you can take them to court to state that your human rights have been breached whilst in their care. The Children and Families Act 2014. The Act makes changes to help with many sorts of difficulties or challenges that children can face in their lives. It will make sure schools give more help to children who have medical problems. It will mean more help for young carers who look after someone else. For children in care, there are changes to improve children's homes. There are changes that will let foster care children carry on staying with families who have fostered them after they reach 18. All children will be able to have free school lunches in their first few years at school, and it will make changes to protect children from getting addicted to tobacco or harmed by smoking. I apologise for the bullet points here. I'm not quite sure what's gone on there. So again, it's to make sure that children are protected, make sure that they've got somebody there for them, improving the children's homes in one of those, allowing foster children to carry on staying with their families until they're 18 rather than moving them out before them. The importance of having free school lunches in their first few years, that can be vital to many children's development, especially if they're not getting hot meals when they return home. The Act simplified. The Care Act 2014. There should be no gap in care and support when people choose to move. The Health and Social Care Act. This is about ensuring a greater voice for patients. The Equality Act 2010 is the introduction of the protected characteristics. For example, everyone should be treated equally in regards to age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership. The Mental Capacity Act 2005. People must be presumed to have mental capacity unless it is proved that they do not. The Children Act 2004 is the introduction of the Children's Commissioner and protecting children at risk. The Data Protection Act 1998 is ensuring personal data of people you are interacting with is accurate, kept up to date and stored safely where it cannot be accessed by anyone that does not have a right to it. So your next research task. Your job is to choose one health and social care setting, so it could be a care home, hospital, it could be a nursery, and you are going to focus on one of the pieces of legislation, and you are going to look at you're going to look to see what are the benefits of that legislation for that health and social care environment, and how does it support individuals' rights and the provision of a quality of care. So that is what you're going to focus on. Benefits for health and social care and childcare environments of one of those pieces of legislation, and how does it support their individuals' rights.